Well, hello. In this video, we're going to do 15 minutes of standing of zhuang, but we're not going to do the same posture that we did before, the holding the ball posture, or the holding the squeaky pig posture. Hold the squeaky pig postures like that. Don't let the squeaky pig escape. Before we do that, we want to talk a little bit about beginning to move slowly, what's called shili, or slow movement. And what this tries to do is capture that feeling we've talked about, where this has been incredibly helpful. Thanks very much, Tresh. Capture that feeling that we've talked about, where you feel like you're, well, what the ancients called holding the Tao. That when you do this kind of posture, and after a bit you feel like there's something there, this idea we've talked about multiple times, but then you can move with that feeling and maintain that same feeling. And what we're doing there, of course, is just maintaining our consistency, our body consistency that we've talked about multiple times, and we'll come back and talk about again and again and again. Maintaining that body consistency as we move, because just as with throwing a punch or anything else, if we are like moving someone, let's say we've got our hands on someone and moving someone or something like that, we don't want to be square and tense, and we also don't want to be soft and unable to like manage the force. So just being able to use our force in a practical and reasonable way in accordance with our quintessence principles of Wushu. And also it does a lot in terms of training us in our overall use of consistency. So it's not just about practical use, it steadily builds up our overall understanding of body consistency and how to use that and deploy that effectively. So I should say at this point, I've got like a whole series on intentional movement that could kind of be brought in here, and I don't want to do that. So I don't want to rehearse all of that stuff. So you can go and look at all that stuff. It says everything that I want to say at this point. So I really don't want to rehearse all of that. It's just too much work. There's lots of other things that we can be talking about. People can go and look at that. But what I didn't really do so much in that series is bring it in directly into this martial arts paradigm of Yiquan, to link it in directly. So I can do a little bit more of that as I bring it into this video series. But I do want to begin with an exercise. It's the same exercise. I think it's the same exercise I started with then, because it's a really basic exercise. And it's just this, in and out like this, forward and backwards, really simple movement. And it's not necessarily easy, because it's about getting the right kind of dialectical interaction between relaxation and tension, and that is something that takes time to develop. But the way to start developing it is through standing. We'll come to that in a minute. But let's start just having a go. And feet in normal posture. Remember, feet can be pointing out a little bit. I've talked before about how it just, if there's pressure pushing out on the knees, it kind of releases that a little bit. I think once you start thinking more martially, more in terms of martial arts application, you should stop doing that so much. Like, you wouldn't necessarily do that if you were going to push forwards, for example. You'd probably have your feet flat or so. I think that's probably how I started, just having my feet forwards. Well, it's perfectly legitimate to do that. In the traditional rules, I think I've said before, it's either straightforward or no more than 60 degrees in total between the two. So we start with this, start with our hands here. And you'll have different feelings even from this start posture, depending on how much zhuang is part of your training, how much isometric posture holding you do. Some people will feel immediately into the feeling that we get of interlinked whole body connectivity from this point. But from here, we're just going to push out slowly like this. You'll see me do little things that you don't have to necessarily do, like I shift my weight. And there's a reason for that I've talked about before. It's exactly the same as when you push from this position, and that you shift your weight onto one side. That helps just create this. You can create, like, instead of just trying to push like that, you push like that. It just helps create this. When one hip goes down and the other hip comes up like that, and you can transmit that force into into the push. It's a more complex way of using the horizontal and the vertical axis into the push. So in my mind, I'm kind of thinking things like that, and I just can't help but like kind of visualize that I'm doing stuff, playing with the force. But you can just do, I can't help it if I want, I can just do it straight. And that's where you should start. Foundation level. So we push out, breathe naturally. Again, one of the differences with Tai Chi, you couldn't possibly do it this slowly. I suppose you could, breathing in and out. No, it'd have to be like a balloon to do that, to keep breathing in like that. So you have to break it down into natural breathing, but you tend to find, like, I always tend to breathe out when I move my hands out. Then kind of just naturally breathe during the movement. So if you imagine like your hands are on like a tabletop or something like that, and it's covered in grease, that's the kind of feeling you want. And this is the kind of feeling that is implied in, for example, the phrase silk reeling, although there's some stuff being talked about that now. So Zhuang works with Zhang Wei. There's a guy who talks about fascia a lot, and he says that the idea of silk reeling comes from what fascia looks like, because apparently it looks very much like silk. I think that's very unlikely, I have to say, that anyone would have been seeing that. You know, maybe at the butcher's or something, you might have seen that, but Occam's razor would suggest, not least that there's no evidence that Zhuang could even throw a punch, never mind being an expert on Tai Chi. Occam's razor would suggest that actually it's the movement quality that everyone in Tai Chi talks about. In the old manuals, the idea of, you know, like if you imagine just running your hand on silk and that feeling that there's resistance but it's smooth, that's exactly the feeling that we're after. It obviously means that, you know, silk reeling. Maybe it refers to actually like a craft. Maybe there's something that people used to do in the manufacture of silk, and then people just use it as a metaphor to kind of get this feeling of relaxation, but there's resistance, visualizing it. So you can visualize that, but we want a different visualization. We want a more useful visualization. This is the purpose of today's lesson, to try and introduce something a little bit more complex. We're going to begin our understanding of the idea of what's called Hunyuan Li, or, well, there's multiple different, it implies multiple different things, like a connected roundness or wholeness, but literal meanings and idiomatic meanings are not always the same thing. So we can explore that another time. I don't want to go too far into it. I want to build people's understanding of this concept step by step. So instead, I want to change our visualization, so not just grease on the tabletop now. I want to change. And I want people to imagine like a big, let's say like dough, sticky dough that you're pushing your fingers in. Or there's another visualization that's a little bit more horrible, and that's to imagine pushing your fingers into someone's body, like actually pushing through the ribs into their body. You know, it's martial arts at the end of the day, training a certain thing in a crisis, certain ability to deal with. Think about our ancient ancestors would have smashed open an animal's skull with a stone without a second thought. Now it makes us throw up to even think about it. You know, and they'd have done that without being psychopaths, just hunting, survival. So imagine this sticky thing, or you know, like in those science fiction movies where there's a portal to another dimension. It's like a membrane that your hand goes into and it's sticky and they push through to the other side. And then something grabs it. So really visualise that. Let it enhance the feeling. Staring very intently into the camera, I recognise that. So we want to expand then from there and take it onto a little bit of a different level. That's just the exercise that we want for the moment, and that visualisation, that's what I really want people to get, because that's what we want to use and then take into this, the standing that we're going to do, and that's going to help us a little bit begin to unfold this idea of Hun Yuan Li. And there's so much misinterpretation around this, and I think one of the best ways to start understanding it is to start understanding it experientially, particularly as I'm going to talk about it in a way that other people don't necessarily talk about it, but in a way that Wang Shenjai does talk about it. So that's a little bit further down the line that we want to start thinking about that. And I mean, just to kind of presage that, like Wang Shenjai talks about Hun Yuan Li in two terms, one as a feeling and then one is the application of that feeling. And we generally speaking only hear people talk about the application of that feeling. And I want people to understand what Wang Shenjai is talking about when he talks about omnidirectional force, and that's not a metaphor, and why we can feel that feeling and then how we apply it practically. But that's a long way off. So remember, in the previous video where we looked at doing 10 minutes of standing, we did a bit of a warm-up. So hope everyone's warmed up. If not, go away and do your warm-up. I'm already warmed up. I've got a timer here. Just it's unhelpful, it doesn't have seconds, so I can't tell you. But we're a minute away from starting, so remember this one. This is a great one. I've even got the heating on, which is... I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to stand a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit, and then at the right point I'm going to bring our visualizations in, and then we're going to start building our understanding with a little bit of an extra visualization, building our understanding of Hun Yuan Li. The zhuang that we're going to use today is this zhuang. So from this very basic posture, holding the ball posture, if we just turn the hands out and drop the arms, so you can see it makes it easier straight away because it's just a little bit less on the arms there. You'll feel it anyway straight away. Just drops it into an easier. There's something you can do anyway when you're standing. Wang Shenjai very clearly recommends that you don't change posture too regularly, but when you're learning and when you just kind of try and build up your endurance, I don't think it's a problem to change. Just release the tension a little bit. Yao Zhongzun certainly talks about just, not getting a cramp and stuff like that. Just relax off and go back. And I think if you can do that, you can switch like that, no problem. But yeah, just turn the hands out. Fingers are pointing forwards like that. Keep the hands forward, relax the shoulders. Okay, let's go. Everyone together. There's at least 4 people watch my videos, so if half the people do it, then there's 3 of us doing it. I'm just going to hold like this. If you weren't ready, you can always just stop and come back. Do it with me. Remember, use some deep breaths to relax your shoulders. Now I feel like I want to wipe my nose immediately. That's not a negative thing, by the way, that the moment you start standing, you start feeling itches, you feel your nose starts wanting to run, pains, old injuries. That's a really good indication of why this is a really good exercise. that it immediately starts increasing your sensory perception of your own body. Immediately starts bringing that back into what it should be. What it should be, it's normal. The normal interconnection between your E and your physical form. So I'll stand for a few minutes, but don't bring this idea in yet of kind of pushing forwards that we've just done. Try and feel like you're pushing down on something, first of all. So really put your, like really feel like there's something in the palm of your hands that you're pressing against. That's a really easy mental induction to use straight away. And let's just stand for a few minutes. Just try and relax off a bit. So don't drop your hands. See what I did there with swallowing. If there's saliva in your mouth, you can just swallow that down, that's fine. That's in the official Yiquan handbook. What you should do is, what you have to do, I've talked about it before, is change your relationship with time. So if you just think about how long you're holding for, and just think about it as an endurance exercise, it's unbearable. It's just like, have you ever been in that situation where you really need the toilet and you're desperately trying to get to the toilet, and you can hold it and you can hold it, and the closer you get to that toilet, the more intense you feel like the need is to go. It's like once you finally get to the toilet, it's like you couldn't have lasted a second longer. It's just the social construction of like needing the toilet, or not so, just like the psychological, it's a psychological thing in your mind, like the closer you are to the end of doing your standing, the harder it seems. So if you focus on time, it becomes unbearable all the way through. Instead, you've got to focus on feelings in your body, not internal force, internal forces. That's what Wang Xiangjai talks about, not internal force. Internal forces. He talks about feelings in the body, like the contradictions in the tension. So just feeling all the things and putting your intention in that. When we start using induction, the use of the mind, it starts intensifying those feelings and really putting your attention on those feelings, even while you're using visualization, just radically changes your relationship with time. Anything seems unbearable if you're just counting the seconds away. Okay, now I want us to start bringing in this visualization that we used before, that we're pushing forward into that soft dough, or that membrane to another dimension. That dimension of wushu excellence that we're all trying to break through into. Really try and feel that feeling that there's something there that you're pushing into, but without the arms moving forwards. You might start feeling a few little, literally pulses here and there in your hands. It's literally a pulse. You start feeling the blood flow. This is called mysterious zhuang. I don't bother with the Chinese terms, teaching the Chinese terms. There's no need. If it's true for everyone. But one of the nicknames for this posture is mysterious zhuang. There's something about it, definitely. I think it's this feeling of pushing forwards rather than holding something. It just affects the psychology in a different way. I don't know why. Well, yeah, it's just, it sounds daft, but it's more active. It's like you're pushing forwards into something. Anyway, really visualize that. So if you do this on a class with a teacher, they come around and knock your arms just to see you've got the right kind of consistency. Fortunately, we don't talk all the time like me. Yeah, keep going with that visualization. Really try and get that feeling and really focus on, are you tensing to get that feeling? No, relax. Relax to get that feeling. It's a contradiction. The more you relax, the less muscle you're using to push forward, the stronger the feeling therefore seems. That tiny little bit of your body is doing more work. That creates the effect. Visualize it. Using the news as the timer. These twits putting me off. Okay, good. So if you're really visualizing that now, I want you to do something that might seem a little bit contradictory, but now keep that intention in your hands, but start putting the intention on the backs of your arms, where your tricep area is down to your elbows. You should start feeling that by now. You should start feeling not tension, but just a little bit of, you start feeling that your body's working there now. Don't lose that feeling pushing forwards. But imagine someone's got a hand on either, it's one person on one side, one person on the other, and they've got a hand on the back of your arm. And as you're pushing in, they start pushing on the back of your hand, back of your elbows, back of your arms. And you start resisting and pushing back. But at the same time, keep pushing forwards. This is perfectly possible. If you're doing it in real life, if you were pushing into a big pile of dough, and someone put their hands on your arms and tried to push you in faster than you wanted to go, you could resist it and still be pushing in. It's just about the right balance between relaxation and tension. Split your attention between your hands and the back of your arms. If you're more advanced, don't lose the feeling of having your attention in your whole body, by the way. This is like beginner level. Just feel the attention split. Attention, not intention, attention. Feel it split. Pushing in with your fingers, you feel your attention there, and you're pushing back with the backs of your arms at the same time, forward and back at the same time. Really try and get that feeling. You've got it. Pushing in two directions at the same time. How's this possible? Mind blowing. It's perfectly possible. All you're doing is triggering the muscles that will push forward and push back at the same time. Not even the muscles, the nerves that will trigger that. The cells even in the muscles that will trigger that movement. Not long to go, just hold that feeling. Don't give in now. If you feel like you get that pretty easy, then keep that feeling, pushing forward and pushing back, and also push up with the backs of your forearms at the same time. You can see where we're going with this. If you can do that, then you're pushing in three directions simultaneously. There's less than 60 seconds to go, don't give in. Just like that person rushing for the toilet, these are the hardest. If you're finding it hard, big deep breath. Relax the shoulders. Okay, that's it. Slowly down. That's 15 minutes. Well done if you did that. Breathe in. You can visualize, like, doesn't matter whether you believe in chi or not, just breathing in everything that's good and just breathe out everything that's bad. It's just a psychological thing. And then just loosen off a little bit. Remember all our exercises. And all you could just So good. If you did 15 minutes, that's great. And I think 15 minutes is the point where you're no longer a novice. If you can hold for 15 minutes and it's not torture, you're no longer a novice. That's not torture. So, and I didn't torture myself to be able to do standing. I didn't like go through extreme agonizing cramps and, you know, of course I was disciplined, but you don't have to torture yourself to do it. You can just do it all step by step. It's step by step, everything is achievable. So if you manage to achieve that feeling, don't worry. Even if you just held the posture, or even if like you just kept having to have a little break and then go back, but you managed to stick with it, that's great. If you did achieve the posture, that's super great. But if you manage to get that feeling where we're pushing forward and pushing back at the same time, then we're beginning to really unfold something quite interesting about how standing can work, that we can feel like we're pushing in two directions at the same time. If you think about it, it's just like the way the nerves are being fired and the way that they're interacting with the cells in the muscle that begin to initiate movement, that begin to encourage or lead the arm to move in one direction or another. And those can be triggered, just like you could trigger those cells on the top of your arm, you can trigger them on the underneath of your arm. You can trigger them in different parts of your body at the same time. So you can be pushing forwards and pushing backwards. Just the body can do this. The body can, particularly when you break it down through zhuang to this absolutely minimal movement level, you can really start feeling how the body can do this, that you can trigger those firings that are necessary to make the movement happen at the same time. And that's a really key understanding. When we expand that into our discussion of Hun Yuan Li's, can get some quite astonishing effects over that, but that's too much to talk about right now. Just try and do that. If you couldn't do it, don't worry, come back and have another go at it. Of course, just try it on your own without me talking all the way through it. That's just, I mean, you could do it on your own anyway, couldn't you? So there'd be no point in me just standing here and doing it. So it's just using the time well. And I think it helps a little bit in the initial stages to have people talking about some of the feelings that you might be feeling and just distracting you a little bit. Later on, as you build up your endurance, then of course you need to start bringing in your mental induction, because that's one of the key things that we're trying to do here. But that's great, and that's all we need for today. So thanks for having a go, thanks for listening. One love as ever. Remember, it's not where you're from, as we say in Manchester, it's where you're at. So see you soon, see you over in the next one.